This is the Nissan Sakura, a brand new EV that's taken the world of electric cars in Japan by storm, and for good reason. Number one, it's tiny, but still relatively practical for its size. And number two, it's cheap. Get this right, on average in the UK, a brand new car will cost you about £40,000. The price of a Sakura, £13,500. Nissan, you have my attention. The Sakura has the attention of lots of people in its home country of Japan and the wider world. This unassuming little electric car has sold nearly 64,000 units since it came out in 2022. To put that into context, it accounts for more than 40% of all electric car sales in Japan. For Nissan, this is a huge hit, and it's not hard to see why. Now, the Nissan Sakura is what they call a K-car, a class of vehicle that is as synonymous with Japanese culture as sushi, sumo wrestling, and cherry blossom. In fact, the name Sakura actually comes from the very tree that gives us the cherry blossom. To qualify as a K-car, you can be no more than 3.4 meters long, 2 meters tall, and 1.5 meters wide. So you get a sense of just how compact these things are. In terms of design details, it's very similar to Nissan's flagship EV, the Ariya. So we've got this black glossy shield at the front, the illuminated Nissan logo, and also these boomerang elements just by the front. The only difference really is the fact that it's really squashed. Imagine a Nissan Ariya that's been hit from both sides by two lorries, and basically you get the Sakura. In profile, you get a sense of just how short the overhangs are front and back. Literally, the wheels have been pushed right to the very edges to maximize the amount of space you get inside. Nissan say that there's enough room in here for 4 fully grown adults. I'll judge that in just a second, but look how tiny the wheels are as well. They're 14 inches in size, but I do love the design detail there. That is designed to mimic a very specific Japanese knot, and it's a lovely little design detail. The doors are kind of weird because they're like full-size doors on a tiny car, so it looks slightly out of proportion, as does the charge port at the back. It's massive compared to the boot, which is going to be tiny, innit? Okay. Yeah, predictably that is quite tiny, isn't it? 107 litres of space, which is enough for, I guess, one smallish suitcase, medium size maybe, or half a human. Not terrible, but not amazing either. One of the best things about the Sakura is that it is super spacious. I mean, look at the amount of legroom I have. That is bigger than you get in most SUVs, I promise you. And the same for the headroom. It has no right being as spacious as it is. Plus the seats also recline. If you want to chill on a long journey, you can. Look at that. It doesn't get much better than that, does it? I mean, it hasn't got a boot, so there is that. But who needs a boot when you've got this much space in your cabin? Fantastic. The front is also surprisingly spacious and not as cheap looking as you might expect given the price. The materials are of a decent standard, the build quality looks up to par, and there's even a surprising amount of tech. Let's focus on some of that technology to start with, actually. In a car this small and cheap, you'd expect it to be awful and not really with a lot of features, but actually, this isn't bad. I mean, it's a little bit unresponsive. It's quite slow when you swipe. It takes a few kind of goes before it actually does the things you want it to do, but it gets there in the end, and it also has Apple CarPlay, which is a good thing in my book. Also, the driver display has a decent resolution, all the graphics are clear, so you can figure out exactly what's going on, and it's all fairly easy to use. It also has dedicated climate control buttons. Now, these are capacitive, unfortunately, but because they're in the same place all the time, you actually don't get confused about what button is where and what does what. The next thing I want to talk about in this car is the material quality. It's surprisingly good. I mean, you don't get leather seats, but these cloth seats are actually really nice. It's not quite one sofa, but because they're very close together, it almost feels like you're in a chair in your living room with a nice little armrest as well. That is very cool. And then finally, this bronze material on the dashboard goes really nicely with the cloth And you get 2 glove boxes, one there and one there. How cute is that? Before we go any further, just a quick reminder, you can not only buy and sell cars using Autotrader, you can also lease one too. We've got amazing lease deals on cars that are in stock and ready to be delivered right now. We can't get you a Sakura, but we can get you all manner of other brands, including BMW, Mercedes, Ford, Audi, VW. The list is endless. Now, back to the Sakura. Okay, when I first got in this car, I'm not gonna lie, I did think I was gonna feel very, very silly. And I'll tell you what, I do feel very, very silly, but in a good way. It kind of puts a smile on your face. It's a nice, happy car, the Sakura. It's not the biggest on the outside, but it's got a surprising amount of room on the inside. I mean, 2 big, massive lads can get in this thing, and they will look ridiculous, but they won't feel overly cramped. There's a surprising amount of space in this thing. Now, I've somehow ended up on a Japanese motorway, which I don't think this car was designed for, but hey, we're here, so we're gonna test it. Let's talk about power. It uses a single electric motor, making a whopping 64 horsepower, and that means it's not very quick at all. There's a few different driving modes though, so let's try out a few of those. I'll whack it into Eco, floor it. Okay, no, that's slow. Let me put it into normal. That's slow as well, but there is a sport mode. Let's send it. Now that's also quite slow, disappointingly. There is a surprising amount of torque though, 195 Newton meters, and the thing only weighs about a ton, so you can actually overtake slow moving traffic. The 0 to 60 time, if you're interested, is a stately 10.1 seconds. All K cars have a top speed of 87 miles an hour. More importantly, Nissan says the car has a max range of 112 miles, which isn't a lot on paper, but probably enough for a week's worth of city commutes. Now, K cars are a bit of a way of life in Japan. Not only are they cheap to buy and cheap to run, but they're also cheap to tax, and that makes them very attractive. Also, in a place like Japan where space is at a premium, every centimeter counts, and that means K cars being tiny is going to appeal to a lot of people. In fact, in Japan, you're not even allowed to buy a car unless you can prove you actually have somewhere to park it. You've got to visit a police station to get a permit before you can buy a car. No space, no car, unless you have one of these. And that's because they take up such little room. Parking is an absolute doddle, and so is general maneuvering. The Sakura has a turning circle of around 4.8 meters, about half as much as the London black cabs. Right, let's talk about some quirks. It is a very tall car, and on a windy day, you do feel it kind of swaying around, especially on a motorway. If you drive next to a lorry, for example, you come out the other side, the wind hits you when you start to rock. Bit scary at first, but you get used to it. The stereo in this car I thought would be terrible, but I actually cranked it up, and it is surprisingly good. I suppose it's because the car is really small, so the speakers haven't really got to fill a big space, but I'm actually surprised by how decent the stereo is. It's also got this self-driving technology called Pro Pilot Assist, which means you press this blue button on the steering wheel and the car will actually kind of do a cruise control thing where it'll follow the vehicle in front. You've got to keep your hands on the wheel, but it does take the pressure off having to constantly accelerate and decelerate. Speaking of decelerating, there's a couple of different braking modes in this car. You can have it in D, where it feels like a normal car, or you can put it into B, which increases the amount of brake regeneration. And on that subject, there's also a separate E pedal button, which means you can pretty much go into one pedal driving. So you accelerate with the accelerator and you brake with the accelerator as well by lifting off. Pretty cool. The other quirky thing, and I suppose this applies to most Japanese cars, is that I keep on turning on the wipers instead of indicating. So my indicators are on the right and not the left. My wipers are on the left and not the right, and it does mess with your head if you're used to driving in the UK. As for charging, it's not the quickest, but should go from 10 to 80% in 20 minutes, which seems pretty adequate for the type of car.
It also features bi-directional charging, so you can use the car to run devices in your house. I guess the only real downside is availability, or lack thereof. Nissan refuses to release the Sakura outside of Japan, which is a real shame because it's a really cool car that's clearly winning plenty of hearts and minds in its native country.
Right, how do we summarize this Nissan Sakura? Well, it's actually delightful. I reckon this car could actually start to win a few hearts and minds in the UK as well. It started to win my heart, if not necessarily my mind. I think ultimately it's the right price, the right size, and it's the kind of thing that will go down really well in a lot of places in Europe. Sometimes, less is more.
Thanks guys, hope you enjoyed that. If you did, then please consider giving us a like and a subscribe. And while you're here, don't forget you can win an electric car of your own for free. This month's prize is a VW ID Buzz worth over £67,000. To enter, hit the link in the description down below, and don't forget it's completely free. We actually give away a car every single month, so make sure you enter. And good luck!